There are times, far too many times, that we see the darkest side of humanity. What does it take for a person to go to one of those really dark places? What do you have to have inside yourself that makes you capable of going there? In 1921, people who otherwise would have been considered, for the most part, decent, law-abiding, upstanding members of society took part in the massacre of 300 innocent civilians. And the likelihood is you've never heard anything about it. Here's some details. 300 people murdered, thousands more injured, property damaged on a massive scale. Businesses, homes, hotels, theaters, personal property destroyed. Insurance companies refused to pay out the victims of this unfathomable horror, and nobody was brought to justice. The proper authorities weren't alerted until well after they could have made a difference. In fact, there was a concerted effort to keep help from arriving to assist the victims. And in case you missed it, 300 people were killed. Hundreds were injured. 10,000 people were left homeless. And 40 or so city blocks were burned to the ground.
1921. The Greenwood section of Tulsa, Oklahoma is the center of African American life for the more than 11,000 black residents of the city. Within this community lie 108 black-owned businesses, 2 theaters, 2 black schools, and 15 doctor's offices. In fact, Greenwood is nationally recognized.
Booker T. Washington, who came through here en route to Muskogee, when he saw the glitter and glamour and the bustling businesses, he declared Greenwood as a Negro Wall Street of America. And since the Civil Rights Movement, we had updated it to the Black Wall Street of America.
Barred from shopping and socializing elsewhere in Tulsa, blacks build a place of their own, Greenwood.
We had everything out on Greenwood and in the Negro area that you needed. There were we had drugstores, grocery stores, cleaners, hotels. All of that, of course, was destroyed when the riot came.
On May 31st, 1921, in what has been described as the worst race riot in American history, Greenwood is destroyed. In less than 24 hours, a white mob reduces Black Wall Street to 36 square blocks of smoldering rubble. Scores of African Americans are killed and thousands are left homeless.
White Tulsans not only invaded Black Tulsa, they not only looted homes and businesses, they burned it to the ground. The entire black community, aside from a few outlying areas, was absolutely put to the torch.
The devastation of this community means much more than the destruction of its buildings. The residents, the men, women, and children who struggled to create this haven will be forever scarred.
I remember the race riot and how mean people were during the race riot and the relationship between white and black at that time. And I wondered how people could be so mean.
In 1921, Greenwood, Oklahoma was a prosperous community. In fact, it was the wealthiest black community in the United States. It was known as the Black Wall Street. But on Memorial Day weekend that year, Greenwood's prosperity, in fact, Greenwood itself, came to an awful, abrupt end. Greenwood was populated exclusively by African Americans, many of whom were very prosperous and ran successful businesses. Because of Jim Crow laws, Greenwood's residents weren't able to shop at white-owned businesses in Tulsa. Now, 100 years ago, Greenwood had its own hospital, many doctors, including a nationally renowned surgeon, a library, schools, hotels, theaters, and a whole lot more. At the time, Tulsa was a hotbed of the biting, bitter racism that plagued the United States. Between 1882 and 1968, there were almost 5,000 known lynchings spread across more than 40 states. Experts agree that there were undoubtedly more, maybe thousands more. Almost 3/4 of the people who were lynched were African American. Think about what's involved in this. Lynching was murder carried out by a mob, and often with the cooperation of law enforcement. If law enforcement didn't actively participate, and there were times the law couldn't prevent a mob from doing what it wanted to do, law enforcement officers often refused to try to prevent the murder and were complicit in what went on.
Eddie.
White policemen could come into the community at any point and arrest anyone. Most of the wage earners in Black Tulsa had white bosses. So Black Tulsa, while it boomed and had a measure of independence, was also under the thumb of white Tulsa's political and police authorities.
Many African American communities in the United States were thriving in the 1910s and 20s. But the high level of home ownership in Greenwood made Tulsa's Black district distinctive.
Now, for some white people, a black person with any wealth, then as well as today, is something that created jealousy.
Race relations in Tulsa were poor in the early 1900s. The KKK had an enormous presence in Oklahoma and in Tulsa particularly.
This era would see the racist roots of segregation boil over into numerous armed conflicts throughout the United States.
The Tulsa race riot of 1921 really is set against a backdrop of a multitude of race riots in America. 1919 was known as Red Summer because literally blood was flowing in the streets. There were over 25 major race riots in 1919 in America.
These riots occur in Minnesota, Nebraska, Pennsylvania, and elsewhere throughout the country. The worst riot during the summer of 1919 is in Chicago, which leaves 38 people dead and 1,000 black families homeless.
The important thing to remember about race riots during this period is that they are characterized by whites invading black communities. These are not black communities that are erupting. These are white citizens, sometimes aided by the police, who are en masse invading black communities, attacking black businesses, and attacking black homes.
On May the 30th, 1921, a 19-year-old black shoeshine boy named Dick Rowland entered the elevator of the Drexel building here at 319 South Main Street in Tulsa. Why was he in the elevator in the Drexel building? Well, he wanted to use the bathroom. And as a black man, he couldn't use the bathrooms that were used by the white population. And there was a colored bathroom on the top floor of the Drexel building. Now, exactly what happened inside that elevator isn't known, but it seemed that as the elevator began to move, it lurched, causing the elevator operator, a 17-year-old white girl named Sarah Page, to trip and fall forward. It might be that Dick Rowland tripped and fell forward. But whatever happened, in that moment, young Sarah Page let out a shout of surprise. And that shout of surprise ended up being a young man's death sentence. Dick Rowland knew that that scream was likely his death sentence. He ran out of the Drexel building as fast as he could, hoping that no one would see him. But somebody did see him. They heard a white girl scream and saw a young black man running. Now, in this case, 2 and 2 did not equal 4, but this was Tulsa in 1921. It wasn't long and he'd been arrested and locked up in the Tulsa County Courthouse. And shortly after that, a white mob arrived, demanding justice. They wanted Dick Rowland lynched. Sarah Page said repeatedly that Rowland had not harmed her. She wasn't hurt. Her clothes weren't ruffled. But the police insisted that this was a case of attempted rape. She refused to sign a statement saying that that was so. But there was no way the facts were going to get in the way of an opportunity to put a young black man in his place. His place being, in this case, the end of a rope. Now, there was absolutely no basis in fact for what the mob was claiming and demanding. But here you had people you would assume were otherwise law-abiding and responsible, demanding the death of an innocent young man simply because of the hatred that existed in their heart. Now, there was no lack of things fanning those flames. It's said that more than 3,000 people in Tulsa at the time were members of the Ku Klux Klan. And there was a white-owned newspaper at the time, the Tulsa Tribune, that ran a number of editorials that were overtly racist. One headline said, "A Negro assaults a white girl." After Rowland's arrest, the Tribune's front page screamed, "To lynch Negro tonight." But a large number of Greenwood men decided they were not going to let that happen. They knew the shoeshine boy had done nothing wrong, and they weren't about to sit by while yet another innocent young black man was executed by a mob for a crime he didn't commit. So that group of men, among them World War I veterans who had served their country, armed, came down here, the site of the courthouse at that time, and they confronted that white mob of more than 2,000. That mob had massed right here in this very area. In the tension that followed, a shot was fired. And it was all on. What followed was mayhem. White Tulsans who didn't have guns stole guns and ammunition from gun shops or hardware stores, and they headed for Greenwood. Greenwood, a symbol of black progress, was burned to the ground, completely. More than 20 black churches, a hospital, a funeral home, a school, a theater, doctors' and lawyers' offices, hotels, grocery stores, restaurants, and hundreds of homes, more than 1,000 structures, were all completely destroyed.
Once authorities in Tulsa realized that the city was really out of hand, a decision was made to go ahead and request the National Guard. So a telegram was sent to Governor Robertson, who authorized the Adjutant General to send the National Guard into the city.
9:15 a.m. 17 hours after the mob began to gather outside the courthouse, Oklahoma City units of the National Guard arrive in Tulsa. Martial law is declared at 11:29. The National Guard takes control of the city and puts an end to the violence, burning, and looting. The troops also round up the remaining African Americans and take them to internment centers. The white rioters are disarmed, but for the most part are simply sent home. Greenwood lay in ruin. Confusion lingers in the wake of the riot. Estimates on the death toll are uncertain, and uncounted numbers of blacks leave Tulsa, never to return.
The number of dead in the riot has historically been a subject of some controversy. The best evidence suggests that upwards of 300 people died in the riot.
People are doing this, so next time before they think about trying to kill another black person, they can be like, damn, we don't want them out here doing this again. They really, any other time, they job easy. They job not easy right now. Grab the mic and try to say that short. Somebody in the house say yeah. I grab the mic and try to say that short. Staring at the wall. Get up, stop. Days like this, I never listen, spent my childhood years in my neighborhood prison. The world don't give a fuck about the kids. I can see from the poverty and the evil shit they did to my young nation. Participation, more hesitation can turn lethal. When ain't no love for a young nigga, he turn evil and burn people with no hope, it's no peace. So all my niggas start regulating on your streets. Bustin' the neighborhood scatters, another drug war. There ain't no truth on negotiation.
listen. He said the world is a living hell for God's children. Picture him still in the pen, doing life plus two, while I'm staring at the world through my rear view.